Hello, this is Kade, and this is Palia, and this is going to be my review of Palia as the game as it is currently out here in closed beta. Now, of course, I don't know if they adhere to the traditional idea behind the beta, but beta should mean that it is at least feature complete, so it should give us a good overview of what the game is all about and going to be about. Now, if you just want to have the short version of this review, it's fairly simple. This is not an MMO, not even remotely close to being an MMO. And overall, if you're looking for a experience where you can play with some friends and you can build some stuff, grind some stuff, do all of that thing, go play Valheim on a private server or something like that, you're going to have a much more enjoyable game experience than you're going to have here in Palia. So that being the short version, let's go into the long version of this review. And to do that, we need to start out with getting behind the concept of what an MMO is. Well, the first thing is in the name itself. It is a massive multiplayer online. So generally a lot of people tend to add RPG behind it. It doesn't really matter. It's about those things, and of course it's a game. So you could almost say it's almost like an MMOG or something like that. But MMO is the general terms being used. Now this game is not massive. So it already fails the first criteria of being an MMO. There's nothing massive about it. This here is a instance private area, of course, so there's no other players here unless you invite some. This is where you build your house. We'll get back to that in a bit. So it fails at this first hurdle of being massive, which is one of those things that, that's in the name right away. It's not massive. There are very few players around you. And quite frankly, for the way the game is laid out, that's almost a good thing, because otherwise it would have been even more of a nightmare to do certain things than it already is. So it is not massive. So what else would we expect in an MMO? Well, you would expect things like an economy. One of those people will always argue that a good economy is critical to the function for a good MMO. Because most MMOs, everything that you do in the end comes down around to the economy. Even for games that are more in the line of theme park, the economy still plays a very crucial role. Of course, when you look at games like EVE Online, in there the economy is literally everything. Now Palia has no economy. And I don't mean like there's not a lot of it, no, I mean there's literally none of it. The only interaction that you can have with other players when it comes to any form of like an exchange, but it isn't, you can request players to give you something, and then players can decide to give you something, and that's then you're limited to requesting a couple of items. I'm not sure if it's a day or a week, probably a day, I assume. If it's a week, that's even worse, but it doesn't really matter. And that's it. That's your entire interaction with other players when it comes to any form of exchange of items or currencies, which in fact you cannot exchange currencies at all. So we have a lack of the fact that it's not massive, and we have no economy. Okay, what is another thing that we often see in MMOs? Well, group content. Challenging content that requires a group of players to work together in order to, get over the content. So these can be things like dungeons, and of course in larger scale raids. Definitely a thing. And in other cases you can also add in PvP. Well, yeah, I don't think we need to talk about PvP when it comes to Palia. So, group content. Challenging group content. Is there any? No, there's none. Why is there none? Because there is no challenge in this game. Like, you do not even have a health bar in this game. You cannot take damage. Conclusion, there is not really any danger to you. There is also no challenge that would involve in any danger. Now, of course, we could have challenges that are not about danger. They could perhaps be about difficult puzzles that require multiple people to be solved. Do we have anything like that? No, at least not that I have found so far in my time playing this game. The only time that I found that I was in need of having any other players around me was before I had a max level upgraded axe, and I needed to cut down what they call a float tree, which is like this max tier wood resource, and for that I needed some help in cutting down this particular tree because they regenerate, so you need to do enough damage over a period of time in order to cut down this tree. So that's the only time I actually needed somebody to do something for. Well, that's not what I would call group content. In fact, just two players randomly chopping at the same tree and it will go down, and there you go. Bob's your uncle. You cut down the tree and everybody moves on. So it is also, if at all, a very short interaction. So we have no challenging group content either. We have no economy, we don't have a massive amount of players. In other words, this is not an MMO. So they like to call it, oh yeah, actually let's throw it as they also like to call it a social MMO, right? It's supposed to be cozy, that's what the players are all about. They're, fanning over the game. But for a social game, you would still expect like a reason to have social interactions. Like maybe certain mini games or people that could play music, give you bonuses, all sorts of things that you could do to have a social experience. And again, there is absolutely none of that in the game. So it doesn't have any of the features that you would prescribe to being an MMO or actually to being a social game. So what we are left with is a game that has very basic gameplay elements. Screw that one. So very basic, not much going on. All that you, in essence, are going to be doing is grinding. And you're going to be grinding a lot because, well, that's the only thing that you can do. Why are you grinding? Well, you need to get your skills up. When you get your skills up, you get the right to buy higher tier recipes, which means you can get better equipment. And with the better equipment, of course, you can make more gold. And with the gold, then you can finally buy the recipes, but also more things for your housing stuff. The problem there is when it comes to the housing, you are wondering, okay, what are we going to do with that? Because, okay, if everything turns out about let's build yourself a really cool house, what is going on with this house? Well, yeah, let's go ahead, let's head back to our little home and take a look there. Because it will also be a good opportunity to show you some other issues that the game has. And well, as you can see, we have in the top left this pink bar. This is your focus bar. This depletes, and you can increase the size of it. You can increase how quickly it depletes, but gives you more experience. So it pretty much depends on how, if you have focus, if you do anything, your skills will be gained faster. And you can increase the rate at which it goes, but it increases the consumption. So you can also increase the size of your focus bar through the form of renown. So yeah, this is my small housing plot. So this is literally a plot size that you get for free right away. I have not expanded this. So let's look over there. So this here is my housey bit. There's a bunch of chests here which are useless. They don't do anything. You find them when you find treasure chests. We have a chair which we cannot sit in. We have a bat. We cannot lay in. We have another chair. We cannot sit in it. Oh, well, we do have a wardrobe, because, well, of course, one thing that the game does have, some stuff for free, like a reasonable amount of outfits for free, but of course what they really want you to do is spend money on the cosmetic outfits. If you want to know the prices, simply divide it by 100 and you will have your price in dollars, euros, the general culprits in that aspect. Which means that for one of these outfits you would be paying about 25 euros. If you want to get the bundle of all three, you're paying 51 euros. Now I know that I am into Star Citizen, so I should not be complaining about this sort of stuff. But I also play other MMOs like I know SWTOR, where I can get outfits for a lot less money than this. So it is very expensive, because of course that's the way they want to fund the game, which is, completely fine. I don't really mind that all that much. It's cosmetics. If you want to charge out of the nose for it, go charge out of the nose for it. I'm not sure if it's wise, but be my guest. The main problem, as we've shown here, is that there's just no functionality to building your house. There's nothing you can do with it, which also means that there's no point in like inviting people over to have any form of like an event. Because if there's no interaction, then what are you going to do? Just stand around? Well, yeah, you can do that in many other games. There's nothing unique about it. If they wanted to make this useful and fun, they should have put a lot of interactive things in here, including, like we said, mini games. If you can have a lot of mini games in here, then you can invite people over. You can play the mini games together, and hey, voila, you have social interaction. But there is absolutely none. So what am I using my housing plot for? Well, to fund my crafting and all of the stuff. So here I've got a cooking station, so I can cook my foods, as you can see here in the bar. There's several options that we can make here. The recipes, again, you unlock. You need certain stuff that you can grind, certain stuff that you need to buy. And throughout that, you can go on and start crafting these. And of course, the higher tier the recipe is, the more focus it has the potential to give to you. Which is all nice, fine and dandy. I don't really mind that all that much. Although I will say the focus drains fairly quickly, so it is a bit of a chore to do the cooking, because it also involves certain mini games, which is just like a rhythm game. You click the mouse when the bar is in the colored section. I can actually, we'll cook a simple one to show you this. We'll make the vegetable one, because it only needs one of them. So we need to prep, and we need to chop this mushroom. And we have a countdown, and we go chop, 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 chop. Oh, look at that, we're done. Let's add the ingredients. Hold down the mouse button to stir. There's nothing else that you need to do. Again, there's no challenge in this, pretty much. Except that you need to hit the key stroke at the right time. Which is like a very, very basic rhythm game. Yeah, let's just sell this stuff. We'll keep the star meat. No, not a lot going on there. What do we have here? Well, here we have some examples of the other issues. These are your crafting, not your crafting, your refining stations. Your crafting station is this thing over here, which has its own issues. We'll talk about those in a moment. So these are refining stations. You put in stuff, it takes time, and stuff comes out. Okay, for some stuff, the times are reasonable. But there's also stuff in here that if you want to craft it, it takes a hell of a lot of time, comparatively. Like an iron bar, and keep in mind, this is the upgraded crafting station. It takes you 4 minutes, pretty much, to make one iron bar. That sort of stuff starts to add up when you're starting out initially, when you really need those things. These silver bars and gold bars, yeah, I mean, 4 hours, come on. Then we have these things to refine things like your leather, which is fine, but it takes 5 minutes a piece to make one. It takes 8 minutes to make a piece of fabric. Then we have these seed extractors, which we need to the farm. Well, anywhere from 20 minutes to well over to almost 2.5 hours of time needed to extract these particular seeds. Now, granted, you could argue you don't need them all that often, and that's fine, but if you want to run a decent farm, you want to run a bunch of different seeds before the time you want to grow them up, so you want to need to start to run multiples of these things just to make sure that you have enough seeds to get a proper farm layout. Then there's also this worm farm to make things like fertilizer and get worms. This takes like an hour for each of them. Then there is the farm yourself. Now, depending on the crop, it will take anywhere from 3 days to, I don't know, 6 days, whatever, to grow them. a day in Palia is, I think, an hour in real life. So that takes 3 to 4, 5, 6 hours, or maybe even more, the higher tier stuff before it is finally grown. Now, you can, of course, lay this out in various ways because they all do different bonuses. So, what do MMO players do at least? They find out the things that are most optimal, so you can just leave it until it's all done. If you don't, then you need to be constantly watering this thing, you need to be removing weeds, and of course, if you're watering the stuff, you're going to be using some of your equipment, which means you need to be repairing your equipment, and in order to repair your equipment, you need to make repair kits. So you have one of these, you say, okay, I'm going to make some repair kits, you get an animation, and then it's done. But if you want to craft in bulk, you need to go through this over and over and over again, which gets a little bit annoying, especially when you craft things like arrows, of which you tend to be using quite a few of them when you're playing. So all of these things makes it just feel like an extreme amount of busy work. And this busy work is all there and it all adds up because if I want to have one of these things to do, I need to make sure that I make food. So I need to have a farm running, or I need to be gathering things in the world, killing animals in the world, to just to get the food. And then, but I would also need tools, so I need my crafting stations. All of these things add up, and it just takes a lot of time and busy work, and especially early on, a lot of the time is literally waiting for your crafting stations to be done. Because the lower tier crafting stations are very slow, and especially then you need these resources. As you progress a little bit, like I have done here, you come up to a place where your main limitation is going to run into storage limitations because you gather so much stuff, you keep your crafting stations running all the time, and you're going to be fine because you don't need the big expenditures anymore. Because you have your upgraded tools, so all that you really are crafting at this point is consumables, or you're refining stuff to sell for gold, and the gold then you use to procure certain items, or even things like inventory backup spaces. So this last one here is like 50,000 gold. It's really expensive. So it is a lot of busy work, and this whole time waiting on crafting stations, it almost feels like it is like designed like a mobile game. And on top of that, because it is all about this waiting, 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 there's also no challenge inside anything of this stuff that you're doing. And that's the problem that I have with this game. There is no challenge to it. Like the only remote challenge you have is when you're hunting the deer and they're trying to run away and you need to shoot them while they're running away. That's literally the only time in this game that you're going to find yourself to be mechanically challenged. Now people will be doing some other stuff, like we figured out that we can animation cancel during resource gathering, so we can speed it up a little bit. So that adds a little bit at least. But again, that's all that there is when it comes to a challenge for a mechanical gameplay standpoint. When it comes to your thinking style of challenges, well, yeah, once you figured out optimal farm layouts, well, that's your thinking challenge done for the game. So it is called an MMO. That is not an MMO. It's called a social MMO. That is not social. And as a game, there's no challenge to it. And it's just like a whole bunch of waiting, waiting, waiting. And it's topped off with, in my opinion, fairly heavily priced microtransactions for cosmetics. All in all, for what they try to proclaim that this game is going to be, I think it is an absolute failure. Like this game it gets a pure, I know what the American grade is, like you use letters. Here in Europe we use the number system, so you get like a 1 to 10. And Palia as a game, I think would be, if I'm being honest, a 2, maybe a 3 out of 10. And that's because there are certain things which are nice, like I do like the art style that they went with, although it's clear that it is a bit unfinished in places, like especially the flooring stuff, like it looks very uniform. It could use a bit more variation in there. And certain things tend to look a little bit plasticky from certain angles, like these fences. But I like the style that they went with, so I'll give them that. I also do like a little bit of the sound design. It works out fairly well, so those are some positives in it. But just the fact that it has nothing else to it, like, yeah, a 2 to 3 out of 10 is really the maximum that you could give a game like this. And it's really sad because they have here quite a few things that could have worked. Even just adding in a player economy could have made a lot of difference in this game, because then I suddenly don't need to worry about doing all of these things, but then people can focus on the things that they enjoy. Like, for example, removing the limitations on how many farm plots I can have. Maybe some people just want to become really big farmers, and then they can sell their farm produce to other players. And then other players may want to go and do the mining, or the wood chopping, or the animal hunting. All of these things. So people can do the things that they want to do. But right now, because you don't have that economy, you need to do all of the activities yourself. And by having an economy like that, even if you don't use an auction house, and in fact in this game I would argue that you wouldn't want to use an auction house, so you need to go out there into town and like put down like a stall or something, because again that's also a reason to interact with players. That would make already quite a big change, and it would make it in that aspect slightly more enjoyable. But besides that, what it really just needs is lots of mini games, interactable houses so that your stuff in there is usable. And these two are really crucial for making it a social experience. And finally, if you really want to look at it, it was like come up with challenges in the form of like puzzles and stuff like that that needs to be solved with a group of players. That it really would be needed to take this game from what it is right now to actually something that would resemble at least an MMORPG. So it's not a massive multiplayer online game, but it is at least a multiplayer online game. With that, it could be, I think, a fairly solid, like a sort of like a 7-ish game. But I don't see them doing that, because I don't think that the developers in this one understand what an MMO is or what a social game is. And without that understanding, you cannot make an MMO. Like, MMOs are the most complicated games to make, and it shows time and time again that most developers have no idea what it takes to make an MMO. And here at Palia, we have just another very good example of developers who have no idea what it takes to make an MMO. So yeah, it makes me really sad, because a game like this could have been a very nice addition to the market. But as it stands right now, it's just not going to work. So that's it for this video. I know it's something completely different than the usual Star Citizen content, but well, with Star Citizen in its current state, it is what it's going to be, and I do plan to just keep my eyes out on things, and if certain things come across my path that are interesting in one way or another, I do like to, give them a look, cover them over, and give some opinions on them. So in this case, that was Palia. I hope this video was at least informative in some way or interesting, and I would like to thank you very much for spending the time in watching it, and I hope to see you around next time. So long, I've been Kade. Bye bye.